Hey guys, how's it going? In this video, I'm going to go over some pro tips for using Visata and Google Sheets to make sure you guys are getting the most out of our product and what you can do with it. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and run a rent roll analysis report and go from there. So let me go ahead and rename this sheet to RRA, for rent roll analysis. And then let's go into extensions, Visata, and open the sidebar. And we will go ahead and create a rent roll analysis report. Give this a second to pull up. And then under reports, I'll click the plus button here to create a new report. And under this drop down next to report, I will choose rent roll analysis. And then we'll go ahead and just leave it labeled as rent roll analysis. If we wanted to change the name right here, we could. And we want it to run into the RRA sheet, so we'll leave that right there. We'll go ahead and leave the headers as default, and refresh never, and bundle single report. We'll get back to these in a second. Next up, let's just go ahead and choose our properties. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as all properties. We will do as of 2020. And we'll go ahead and do the first of that month in 2020. This is because I'm working with dummy data here, so we have to backdate it. And then we'll leave this unchecked for now. And then finally, we get to choose which columns of data we want it to pull through. So we will go ahead and leave it as it is. This looks good. There might be some information here that I don't need that I could go ahead and take off. So for example, I'm going to take off these columns. The move-in date. Let's see. I think the rest of this looks good. And I'll take this one off. And then I actually just need their full name. I don't need their first name and last name. So let's save that and run it. Now I'll give that a second. It is running that report live from Rent Manager. Right into this Google Sheet here. Perfect. So there's that data. And right here, I'll go ahead and mention that if you ever want to include a kind of a header above these orange headers to label this report, that's where you can come back up here and click on headers default and change it to show table names. And so we can go ahead and run that so you can see what that looks like. And that just adds kind of a gray header above it to label it. However, we will see in a little bit that it's actually user to create pivot tables and formulas if we only have one row of headers. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that back to default. So let's save that and run that again. Okay, so now that we have this report pulled in, let's say that I actually was missing one column here. So I have my account name, my tenant here, and everything else that I'm looking for, except I actually want to pull in whether we're evicting these tenants for each of these tenants. And it turns out that I actually have a user-defined field in Rent Manager to track that. And so that user-defined field is not an option here in these list of columns. And so instead, what I can do is I can actually pull that user-defined field in another sheet and then pull it back into here using what's called an XLOOKUP. And so what we'll do is we'll create another tab, and we'll call this eviction statuses. Then we'll go ahead, click the back button in the sidebar. We'll go to queries and create a new query. Queries is going to be the best way to access user-defined fields. And since it's a tenant user-defined field, I'm going to click on tenant under entity. So we'll scroll down, choose tenants. And then once that loads, it takes a second because it is actually pulling in those user-defined fields so that I can choose from them. And then I will click add a column, search for user, find values, and I will scroll down to evicting, which is my user-defined field to track eviction status. And then I want to just pull this in for all of my tenants so that I can use an XLOOKUP formula to add a column here for eviction status. So let's go back to eviction statuses, and I will save this and run it. So that'll pull in into this sheet that I've selected here. Perfect. So we can see most of our tenants do not have a value there, but a few of them do. And so we will be able to see those in our report. So let's jump back over to RRA. And the way we're going to pull this in is we actually want to use this first column that was automatically added here, which is tenant ID. This is a unique identifier for each tenant. And we don't currently have a tenant ID in these columns, but we can add it. And then we can use that to perform an XLOOKUP. So let's go back to that report. Click on rent roll analysis. And then right here, you can see there's this account ID field. And this is the equivalent of tenant ID. And they just, it's labeled a little differently here by Rent Manager. And so we'll toggle on the account ID, click Save, and then click Run Report. Perfect. So now we've got that account ID pulling in here. And so now we will add a column all the way to the right over here. And we're going to call this evicting or eviction status. And then just for consistency, I'm going to copy the formatting from here and paste it in. And then I'll just change the color to blue and the text color to white. And I like to do this just so I can distinguish that this is a custom formula that I've added that is not pulling from Rent Manager from the sidebar. So then right here, we'll go ahead and do an XLOOKUP formula. So equals XLOOKUP, click on this. And so the way XLOOKUP works is I'll put in my search key, which is the account ID, and then I'll put in a comma. And then the next thing that it asks for is lookup range. So where am I looking this tenant ID up? So I'm going to go over eviction statuses, and I want to look up this tenant ID in column A. So I'm going to click and select starting at row 2, and I'm going to select all the way down. Now I could actually select all the way down to the bottom of the sheet, but if I do that, then if I were to refresh this query in the future and there were more records, it wouldn't include any additional rows that were added. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to get rid of this 18. So if I just hit backspace twice, then I just have A2:A. And that ensures that it will look up that tenant ID in the entire column, no matter how many rows there are. So then we'll type a comma, and then finally we have to give it the result range, which is where we look up or what we want to return once we've found that tenant ID. And we want to return the value in column B. So I'll select starting at row 2 and select down. And then just like we did before, I'm going to get rid of this 5 here so that it actually just goes all the way down to the bottom of column B. And then I can go ahead and put a closing parenthesis and hit enter. And so now it looks like this account does not have a value for that tenant, for that user-defined field. And so some of these should, if we go ahead and drag this all the way down. Now, actually, I'm not going to drag this down, and this is another pro tip that I have for you, which is that if I drag this formula down, we have a similar issue. If I were to refresh this report in the future and there were more records, there's no way that I can guarantee that this formula will copy all the way down into those new rows. And so what I want to do instead is use a map formula. And so all I have to do is add in at the beginning here, MAP parenthesis, and then I choose, instead of just having A2, I'm going to have the entire column A. I'm going to perform this formula for all of column A, starting at row 2. So I'm going to type A2 colon A, which means perform this action for every row in column A. And then I'll put a comma, and then I have to label what each of these values is. And so the way I do that in Google Sheets is I type lambda, and this is just how Google Sheets asks me to do this. So type lambda, and then I'm going to call this tenant, or just TEN underscore ID. And then I'll put a comma. And so now I leave the rest of this formula, and the only thing I have to change is right here, instead of A2, I put tenant ID, 10 underscore ID. And so now it's going to do this X lookup for every single value in column A, which is exactly what I want. And if I hit enter, let's see if we have any values. So it looks like we do have a yes here, another yes here, and then we actually have a few accounts that were not in the list of tenants that I pulled. And that's because those ones are vacant. So one thing I'm going to do to fix that is if I go into my formula one more time, I can add what I want Google Sheets to put in here if there is no matching account ID. And so we'll go ahead and just put, actually what I'm going to do is put it at the beginning here and say if 10 ID equals a blank string, then just put a blank string here. And then I'll hit enter. So now we get rid of those NAs, which is good. So this looks a lot cleaner. And so now I've effectively added my own additional column here that tells me whether any specific tenant is under an eviction process. So I should actually relabel this to evicting, since yes represents that it is evicting. And there might be, there's one watch here. So this looks great. I was able to add this additional column. And so let's say that I wanted to be able to now look at this report every day and not have to refresh it myself. So in order to set that up, I will go into this refresh setting right here and change it from never to daily. And so now this report will refresh every day or every night at midnight or between midnight and 1 a.m. The only problem is, let's say that I switch this, let's say that I had this as of today. And when it refreshes, I want it to always be as of today's date. Well, currently I've just hard-coded a date here. Even if I put today's date and I choose today, if I set this up to refresh, it's still going to run it as of the 25th every day, even if tomorrow is the 26th and the day after that is the 27th. And so the way we will fix this is we will actually use this range dynamic feature here. And so before I do this, I'm going to click the plus button to create a new sheet. And I'm going to call this my date range sheet, date range. And really, it could actually just be called as of date, since that's what is getting put in here. So we'll call it as of date. And then in this cell, I will go ahead and just put equals and then today. And that is a formula that will generate today's date, whatever today's date is in this cell. And then what I can do is I can switch this to be dynamic. Oops. Switch this to be dynamic. And then that sheet that I just created is not showing up yet. And so in order to get it to show up, I have to click this back button. I'll hit save. And then I just have to reopen this report, and that sheet will show up. So we'll reopen this report, and then we will change this as of date. So before it was a static date, and we'll make it dynamic, and we'll choose as of date, and we'll do cell A1. So that looks perfect. And so now, if I hit save, it will refresh every day at midnight and reflect that day's, whatever the current date is, because it will pull from this cell right here. And so just to show you that this works, we'll go ahead and hit run report, and it will run this report as of today's date. Perfect. And you're not able to see for sure that it ran as of today's date unless we add this column here, which is the period as of date. Or you could also think of this as the report as of date. And so that's just going to have the same value all the way down. And so we'll go ahead and add that in so you can see what the report as of date is for this report. Now, one thing I want to point out is that if I toggle this column on, it's going to need one additional column more than what's been allocated. So right now we have up to column T for this report, and we need one more column. And by default, Visata, when it runs this, it's going to recognize that it needs one more column, and it's actually going to insert it right here at the end. And the problem with that is it'll actually mess up our evicting formula. And so what I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to manually insert this column right here to the left of the ID. So I'll click right-click here and then click Insert One Column Left. And by doing that, now when Visata runs, it won't insert an additional column over here, and it'll just use this allocated column here because it recognizes that it has the total number of columns that it needs in this orange section. So we'll go ahead and hit save on that, and then we'll hit run report. Give it a second there, and run report. And so you'll notice that it put in that period as of date right here into column A. And what's really cool is now if we go over here to evicting, before we were looking up that tenant ID in column A, and now you can see it automatically switched it to column B. And that happened when we inserted one column to the left. And that's the benefit of inserting the columns before you rerun the query or report over here. And that will ensure that none of your formulas are messed up. So this formula is still intact, and if we scroll down, we can see we have some yeses and some other values in here. So, and then over here on the left-hand side, we can see that that as of date is indeed pulling today's date, which comes from this cell right here. One thing that I often will do as well is to save kind of storage on this spreadsheet and make sure that it runs as efficiently as possible. I will delete all of these extra columns here just to clean up this sheet a little bit, and then we'll delete these rows down to row 1000 and delete rows. So this cleans up this sheet a little bit and also makes it a little more intuitive that this is the only cell that has anything going on that's being used by this spreadsheet. Now, let's say that I actually wanted to be able to run this rent roll analysis report with this evicting column, but for multiple months. Let's say I wanted to run it for the last 12 months. Well, in that case, I could set up 12 different sheets and run a different report into each one, or I can use Visata's bundle feature. And so if I scroll up here, there's this bundle setting right here, and right now it's set to single report, but I can click on this and change it to multiple periods. Now, before I do that, I want you to take a look at the parameters right now. So right now we just have properties, as of date, which is dynamic, pulling from this range, and then this, this checkbox down here. Now, if I change this to multiple periods, we see a few new parameters. So we still have our properties drop down here, but then we also have this option for bundle periods, and as of date has changed a little bit, and then we have two new options for bundle start and bundle end. So I want to run this report for the last 12 months. So I want my bundle period to be monthly, but I want it to actually run as of the last day of each month. So I'm going to switch this from first day of each period to last day of each period. And then I want it to run the last 12 months. So I could just go into here and choose the month that I want to go back to. So I could scroll up here and choose October of last year up until September of this year. But we have the same issue if we do this that we mentioned before, which is that when this refreshes every night, it's going to continue to refresh for these months that we've selected. And so in order to get it to update to the current month, let's say once we enter into October, I now want it to run going all the way up until October of 2025, not just September. So we're going to use this dynamic date range option again for this. Now, before I do that, I need to prepare the dates that I need in this sheet right here. So I'm actually going to insert one more row below this. Actually, we're going to insert it above. And then I also will insert one more column. And so this will be my start date or start month. And then this will be my end month. And so equals today should actually be right here. So we'll put equals today and hit enter on that. And then over here, I want this to be today's date minus 11 months. And so we will use a formula called eDate, which takes dates a number of months before or after another date. So I'll use eDate, and then my start date will be today. And then I want to give myself 11 months prior. And so we'll hit enter on that. And then, yeah, that looks perfect. Now, one thing I want to point out is that because we're going to be using these values as months, not the specific day of the month, it doesn't matter that this is the 25th. It just equates this to October of 2024 when we pull it into here. And so if I wanted it to be the first, I could use the EO month formula, which is EO month, and then today's date minus 12, and then I do a +1 right here. And that would give me the first of that month. But like I mentioned, in this case, because we're only selecting a month for this bundle, since that is our bundle period, then any date of this month will work. Now over here, I will change this to be dynamic, and I'll choose as of date and put, instead of A1, I want A2. And then for here, I will do B2. And so that will be my bundle start and bundle end. So now let's go ahead and save this and run it. And you'll notice that nothing is different in this RRA sheet where it runs the data. We still have the exact same columns pulling in. The only difference is that that period as of date, which is my first column, will actually include multiple values. And so essentially all of those, each of the months is going to be stacked one on top of the other. And so first we see October of last year, and then as we scroll down, we will see November, and then December, and then it will go all the way until the current month. And so we'll give it a second to run all of those months. And so we can see it continues to just pull in the data for each month. And the reason this is useful is that by having all of the data in one place, it's much, first of all, we don't have to have 12 different sheets. And then we can also do a lot more with this month column here. And so one example, so it finished running, and we can tell because the spinner went away, and then we also, it kind of formatted it orange and white, which is how we know that it finished. And so if we scroll all the way up, we have all of the columns just like we did before. We still have our evicting column with the values pulling all the way down to the bottom. And so you can see that even though we now have way more rows than we did before, this evicting formula just goes all the way down. And there's no formulas in each of these cells. You can see there's just a value here. But that's because in our first cell, we used that map formula. And if I were to type something in here, like test, it will actually mess up the entire formula. And if I go up here, you can say array result was not expanded because it would override data in that cell that we put something in. And so I'll make sure to go back down here and take that out so our formula works and it applies all the way down. Now let's say that instead of running this report for the last 12 months, month by month, you actually wanted to run it for some other set of dates. So maybe the last 12 quarters or the last 5 years Or maybe instead of the last day of each month, you actually want it to run as of the 15th of each month. So none of those options will be available here with our bundle feature, but there is another way that you can bundle this report that allows you to use any set of dates that you choose. And so the way you do that is, first we have to go into here, and instead of having a range from our start to our end, we actually just have to create a list of the dates that we want. And so let's go ahead and add about 10 rows, and we'll put in for the first one. Right now I'm just going to hard code these dates, and then in a second we can use formulas to automate them. So let's say I want 10, 15, 24, and then after that I want 11, 15, 24, and then for whatever reason I want to skip December, and then I go January, 15, 25, and then February, 15, 25, and then I want, let's skip March and go to April. So 4, 15, 25. So the point here is that this is a very random selection of dates that I want it to run the report for. And so we'll go ahead and delete this column. And so this could be any selection of dates. It could be the end of each quarter for the last 4 quarters, the end of each year for the last 5 years, or the beginning of each year. And I can use formulas to create any kind of date selections here that I want. And so let's say that I had these set up and these were the dates that I wanted. Then what I can do over here is switch this from multiple periods back to single report. And then for my as of date, instead of just choosing one cell, I can provide it multiple cells. So I can go from A2 to A6, or maybe I don't know how many dates there's going to be in this column, and so I just want to go all the way to the bottom of A. So now I can save this and click run, and it will run this report for each of those as of dates and stack them just like it did using the bundle feature. Give it a second here. Perfect. So there's that first month that we pass in, which is the 15th of October of last year. And then we have the 15th of November, and then we skip December and go to January, and then February eventually, and then April. So it uses the exact dates that we pass in right here, which means I could have any selection of dates. If I wanted it to be quarterly, yearly, or any other custom date selection, then I can use this option and pass those in like this. Now, let's say that I actually don't find this data super useful the way it is, and I want to aggregate the data a little more, and that's very understandable. The data coming out of Rent Manager like this is really not meant to be useful to look at. This is not really something I would go ahead and just share with an investor or with my team, but rather I'd want to kind of aggregate this data to create some useful metrics. So I could create charts with this data, and another thing I could do is I could create a pivot table. So to create a pivot table, I'm going to click on column A here, and then scroll over, hold Shift on my keyboard, and click column V. And that selects all of these columns. And then I go to Insert and Pivot Table. And you'll notice that this is the data range that it's selecting. So RRA, the exclamation point separates the sheet from the range, and then it's columns A through V. And columns A through V, this is really important. If I select a specific range, so if I change my range here and I choose here all the way over to the end and all the way down, my range is now A1 to V1126. So it goes all the way down to the bottom of the sheet. And this is not good because of the same issue that we mentioned earlier, which is that I don't know that there's always going to be 1,126 rows in this report, especially if it's updating automatically. And so it's really important that I get rid of these numbers. And it turns out that with pivot tables, you actually can't have a number here without a number here. And so this right here would be invalid, and it will actually add that 1126 back in. So I can show you how that happens. If I click OK, and I have A1 down to the end of V, and I click Create, it will create that pivot table, but you'll notice it put in that 1126 here, and we don't want that. We want it to be dynamic. So I'm going to fix this right now and get rid of the 1126, and then I will also get rid of this 1 right here. So then I click OK, and you can see now it accepted this as a dynamic range. And so now that I have this pivot table set up, I could choose one of these suggested options. So I could, let's see, the sum of rent, vacancy loss, and miscellaneous charges for each property name, or a couple other options here. So these are pretty cool. I could actually go ahead and click on one of these, and it automatically creates this chart of my total rent, total vacancy, total miscellaneous charges, and total of all total charges for each property. So this is cool, but let's say that actually I just want to show the sum of rent, and I want to show for each of those month ranges that I had selected along the top by property. So let's go ahead and tweak this. In fact, I'm just going to uncheck this and we'll start from the beginning. So under rows, I will add property name, which is right here. And then under columns, I will add the period as of date, which is each of the date ranges. Now, let's say that I actually don't want to show a grand total over here. So I will uncheck this option here. And then for our values, I want my total rent for each property for each of those dates. So now that's exactly what I have here. For each of these dates, I am seeing the total rent for each property. And I could further break this down if I wanted to. I could click add under rows and break it down by unit name. And that would more accurately reflect what you see in Rent Manager. And I could even add tenant name if I wanted to. So there's lots of flexibility. I won't get into all of the customizations that we could do in the pivot table, but there's lots of things we could do here. And what's cool is that now if I wanted to share this with the team and look at it every day, it will update automatically, pulling from this range right here. Now, one thing I want to mention is that we set up this report right here to refresh, but we would also want to make sure we set up this eviction statuses query to refresh daily as well. So we would go back over to here, switch over to queries, and you can see this one is not set up to refresh. We'll open this up, and again, we have to wait just a second while it loads those user-defined values. While it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and delete these extra columns here, since that is unnecessary load on the spreadsheet. And then over here, I will change this refresh from never to daily. And then I will also title it up here, and we'll call it evictions. And then I can save that. And now by clicking save, it will refresh this daily as well, along with our rent roll analysis report. So let's open up this pivot table. I'm going to rename this to report. And most likely this is the sheet that I actually want people to be able to see if I'm sharing this with my team. So I could actually go in here and hide all of these sheets just to avoid, kind of clean up the spreadsheet and avoid confusion for people. And so this is the main report that I want people to be able to see. And then I could also make this look a little bit better. So for example, this first row here, maybe this doesn't seem that useful, so I will hide that row. And then I actually want this to just show the month, for example. Let's say I want this to only show the month. I could go into here to format, go to number, and choose this format right here, September 2008. So now that looks a little bit cleaner. That's what I'm looking for. I could drag this out so I can see the property name a little better. And I could tweak a few other things on this pivot table. And that's not the goal of this video. Obviously, there's lots of resources online for pivot tables and creating charts. But the last thing I do want to mention is that we can create very robust reports and charts and dashboards in Google Sheets. But if you really want a very professional dashboard where you can click into different charts and cross-filter and drill down, then you will want to use an actual dashboarding platform. And what's cool about these dashboarding platforms is they can all connect to Google Sheets. And so you can create a dashboard on a dashboarding platform and connect it to a Google Sheet that's refreshing automatically. So I could connect a dashboard directly to this sheet right here and pull all of this data. And then I can create any charts and dashboards that I want based on that data. And so the one that we recommend is Looker Studio because it is free and it also is made by Google. So it integrates very seamlessly with Google Sheets. And so just to show you what that looks like, there's actually a shortcut way to create that report. I can go to Extensions, click Looker Studio, and click Create a Report. And then here it asks me which source sheet do I want to use. So I want to use this RRA sheet. And I do want to use the first row as headers. And I want it to include hidden and filtered cells so that even if I am playing around with this data and filtering it just to look at the data, I still want everything to be shown on the dashboard. And then optionally, I could include a selected range instead of everything. But I want to go ahead and just include all of these columns. And so to column V. And so I'll just leave that unchecked and click Create. And so this will open up a dashboard in a new tab, and you can see this URL is lookerstudio.google.com. So this is a Google product, and it is spinning up a dashboard for us right here. And you can see it actually puts in a couple charts by default. It tries to guess what you might be wanting. And so we kind of have some kind of bar chart here. It looks like not exactly sure what it's displaying here. I can't even quite see the property names. But we'll go ahead and delete this and delete this pie chart here and create our own chart. And now if I wanted to, I could go ahead and add any charts that I like from this from these drop-down options here. You can see there's tons of different options, and all of these charts will be able to cross-filter and allow you to add filter drop-downs at the top and be able to drill down into your data. And this video is not intended to be a Looker Studio guide, so we're not actually going to create a report in this video, but feel free to use any of our other videos as resources to create a dashboard or any other online resources that are not from Visata to learn more about Looker Studio and creating dashboards in here.